Ta-da!
There you are.
You could hear me, and now you can also see me.
Loud
Thanks so
and
much.
clear.
Welcome, loud and clear. I'm glad to hear that. Welcome to Potato Days 2020. I'm connecting with you from the Midwest of the United States, right here in Minnesota. We had a wild night last night, and we still are waiting on the actual results from the big election. But that notwithstanding, we're going to talk about agriculture in Minnesota and America and what's going on over here with regards to our farmers. Thank you so much for joining me. And let me tell you, it's a lot easier to be hyped up and energized to get going for a talk at a more normal hour than in the middle of the night. So let's go. Usually when you give a public talk, people are thinking, we go around and you ask for advice and people will say, well, you don't want to be too nervous. So imagine your audience naked. And well, that's fine advice. Although it doesn't exactly translate to these sorts of online, new world style of presentations. But that being said, I never chose to imagine any of my audiences naked. I just imagined my audiences without farmers. And that made me pretty comfortable because, as it turns out, it wouldn't be very different. Without farmers, we'd all be hungry, naked, and sober, which sounds like a miserable world. So our farmers are a lot. Not only do they feed, clothe, and provide us with tasty things to drink, our family farms provide us with so much more. They're a critical piece of our rural community. They're an economic backbone of our national economies, and they're our best stewards of the land. So check this out. Here's some data. I grow hops for beer. Maybe you've had beer or heard of beer before. 90% of the money when someone buys hops from me stays in our state. Whereas when someone buys hops that are not grown in our state, only 10% of that money stays. And that's a meaningful difference. That's 80% more of that money stays here. And that's because my employees are here. I pay taxes here. Our money is, I live here. Our money accrues here. And that's different. That's important because that means more local jobs. It means more tax revenues to support our schools. It means more families are able to stay in the community and send their kids to those schools. There's more butts in the pews, and there's support for local mechanics, farmer cooperatives, and input suppliers. So it's a very strong community fabric comes from having strong family farms. And we do more than that as family farmers. We also know that this quote from Ada Leopold is true, that land is a community is the basic concept of ecology. But that land is to be loved and respected is an extension of ethics. Now, all of you out there in the audience, you were answering that question earlier. Where are you from? Are you from a farm? Did you grow up on a farm? Do you farm currently? Anyone who's got that connection to agriculture knows that this is how farmers consider their land. It requires external factors and pressures that kind of push farmers in a direction where they're unable to love and respect their land as much as they wish. And so all that's well and good. We love our family farmers. We love our farmers. They feed us and clothe us. But without our efforts, and especially here in America, we might lose our farming class. And those are for some fairly dire reasons. First of all, our farmers in America are old. The average age of a farmer in America is 58.3. On top of that, 33% of farmers in America are older than 65. This is a caricature of my grandfather. He's 98. He's still farming in his mind. And he actually just commented on my LinkedIn post about giving this presentation and said, that does look like me. So confirmation that this is an accurate depiction of what my grandfather looks like. But yeah, so 33% of American farmers are 65 years of age or older. And now that's retirement age in most job categories, and would be considered wildly old and a huge source of challenge, because how are we going to replace those old farmers as they're unable to or choose to transition out of the work? And it turns out we're not doing a great job of that. So the data supports that we're not doing a good job. So this grid of little farmer icons represents 100,000 farmers. That's how many farmers America lost between 2012 and 2015. Now, the next slide is going to show you how many farmers we added under the age of 30. So get ready, see if you can catch it. I'm not saying it's easy. Check this out. Do you see it? Now, if I were in person, I'd have a little laser pointer and I'd circle the small little bit of white that showed up in the upper left corner of the slide. That represents the roughly 1,000 farmers under the age of 30 that were added across America in that same time period, 2012, 2017. So that means a lot of things. One, I'm a very rare specimen, 1 of 1,000, give or take. So feel free, stick around in the chat, and I will, autograph something for you. But 2, it means we lost 100,000, and we only added, let's call it 1,000 under the age of 30. And so that very rapidly means if you have a bathtub full of farmers, it's going to be empty real fast. And so what does that mean, and why is that happening? We'll get to what that might mean later, but why is it happening? There's at least one reason, probably certainly several, but here's one we're going to take a look at today, and that's prices. We're going to play a game with this. So if you weren't listening to me before, perk up now, close those other tabs. We're going to play a game. This is how it's going to work. If you're familiar with The Price is Right, the American television show, this is similar to that. What's going to happen is I'm going to show you a slide like this one. This one is just an example, so we can all learn together. But the average retail price of an item in America. So in this case, it's a gallon of milk, $4.49 is the average retail price. Now, I'm going to show the farmer's share of that, $4.49. That's $1.32. So on the next few slides, there will be additional examples, and I'll show the retail price. And then before I show the farmer's cut, I'm going to ask you for your kind of vote and which way you think it's going to go. So if you think the farmer's cut for bread retail price is $3.49. If you think the farmer's cut of that is more than the $1.32 that the farmer's share is for milk, put a heart react in the studio. If you think the farmer's share is lower than their share was for milk, put a thumbs up react in the studio. Make sense? So if you think the farmer is going to get a greater share by raw number and the value of bread, share a heart react. If you think the farmer is going to have a lower share than milk for bread, put a thumbs up react. So the actual cut is 12 cents. I see a lot of thumbs up. I will say that you are a very smart and wise audience. So I think that A+ across the board, 12 cents is farmer's cut of bread. Let's move on to the next one. This one is near and dear to my heart. It's beer. Average retail price in America is $8.99. So how much of that retail price goes back to a beer farmer like me? Again, if you think it's higher than milk, which was $1.32, put a heart react. If you think the farmer share is lower for beer than for milk, put a thumbs up react. I'll give you a little bit of time, and I'll share a tip. I wish that this number was higher. Okay, so maybe that will affect your reactions. See the reactions coming in? I'm going to click the button. Here we go. Are you ready? Big reveal. Farmer's share is just 15 cents per 6-pack. Like I said, I wish that was higher. But maybe you can see through these prices and how maybe that's a challenge for new people getting in, is that it just doesn't pay. And then finally, we're here at Potato Days, so I would be remiss to not share the same information but for potatoes. Here in America, the average price of a sack of potatoes was $6.99. And the retail price was $6.99. And the farmer's share was $1.52, which is really not so bad. It's very close to the kind of milk. And I should say that there's a lot of potato farmers near me. I'm near a very sandy soil region called the Anoka Sand Plain. That's actually where I first started farming, was on the Anoka Sand Plain. A lot of potatoes being grown in my area. Unfortunately, I was not able to get any chips to enjoy with you, or crisps, or whatever way we might discuss fried wafer-thin potatoes, but they are easily one of my favorite snacks. So thank you for playing the game with me. Now we can see the full picture, right? America's farmers are getting older, we're getting fewer, and they're also getting, well, maybe not paid super well for their labor, and maybe that's why we're not getting all the farmers we want. So this problem, though, is not just for farmers to worry about. We talked about earlier how valuable farmers are for our rural communities, how valuable they are for our national economies, how valuable they are for stewarding our landscape. This is something that affects all of us, whether or not we live on a farm or actively farm right now. So what are we going to do about it? First, a little side story of success that I believe we could replicate in our new way to support more farmers. So it's the sustainability movement, the green movement. We've all heard about it. It's a part of our day-to-day lives. You wouldn't go a day without considering recycling or even looking at solar panels on your roof. But it didn't start there. At least in America, it started around roughly the 1960s with a big movement from the hippie generation of planting trees. And planting trees are great, but they're just the first step. You know, we know now that planting trees isn't enough. We know now that we need to have larger scale solutions to try to address climate change and have a sustainable way to live on this planet. And so there's solar panels, there's wind energy. We're talking about international climate change agreements. We're talking about national policy, matters of importance for people who are making their voice heard in their democracies. Now, if we compare that experience and the success of the sustainability and green movement with where we're at least in America, when it comes to the food movement, we got a long way to go. In America, it's all about voting with your fork, or so that's the story goes. That means taking your dollar and buying local food, buying food from the farmer's market, buying local at the supermarket. And while that's great, that's not going to be enough to address this loss in farmers. We've been having farmers markets for, decades, and we're still losing farmers at a rapid rate. So we must do more. And the answer to that is to do more with policy. How do you affect policy in a democracy? It's a rhetorical question, of course. We all kind of know, right? You vote. So instead of voting with our fork, I believe we all need to vote with our vote and create a larger systemic impact on the situation that our farmers and rural communities are facing. There's things that we can do. We can fight for fair prices. We can talk about supply management and quotas, guaranteed prices for farmers, talk about fair and open trades that our farmers can get their crops sold and put an end to trade wars. And by voting with our vote, we can put leaders into place who will create a better future for our farmers and our rural communities. But we don't have to wait around for just an election to come around. We can do it ourselves. You might recognize that person in the middle there with the silly hat. If you do, bonus points for you. But what myself and a handful of other young farmers were able to accomplish in 2018 and the state legislature of Minnesota, we were able to pass a historic first in the country tax credit that basically incentivizes current farm landowners to sell or rent their land to the next generation. To try to address that fact that we lost 100,000 and only added 1,000 under 30, we put the effort in. Now we put an incentive so that more young people can get into agriculture. And this has been wildly successful in our state. Millions of dollars in benefits have gone out to encourage this transition. It's been replicated in other states, and it's being discussed as a national law. If we can do it, the message here is anybody can, right? If a group of ragtag, non-policy experienced young farmers with no money could accomplish this outcome, it means anyone can. And there's so much potential out there for us to improve the political landscape for farmers. Now, there might be skeptics in the audience. This might be you, Mr. Purple Shirt. And why can't we just keep, minimizing expenses? What's so wrong with farmers only getting 15 cents per six-pack of beer? There's nothing inherently wrong with that, but it's only one way to measure the success of our agricultural systems and our policy structures around that. So back in the 80s and 90s in America, we picked up a policy of get big or get out. Very famous. That's been our nation's ag policy since then. And what get big or get out really boils down to is maximizing production while minimizing costs. And we've reached a point with Get Bigger, Get Out, where farmers themselves have become a cost to be minimized. It used to be that it took 6 cows to earn a living, then 600, 6,000 is about where we're at in my area now. And where there used to be 100 small dairy farms, there's one really large dairy farm. And what that means for our community is very real. That Get Bigger, Get Out mentality of consolidation has led to wild changes in our immediate area. Now, with only one dairy in the area, the overall employment opportunities are lower. The margin of the sales of those milk is going to fewer parties, so there's less money flowing around. There's less kids around to go to school. There's less families to support the churches. There's less people to shop at the grocery store. There's a kind of as we get more and more efficient, we remove more and more people from the landscape, and then there's less people in the landscape. There's not enough people in the landscape to support a community. We lose the culture part of agriculture. And this is not a problem. Clearly, it's bigger than we're going to solve with farmers markets and good intentions. And policy got us here, and policy can get us out. We can work together to reverse these dire trends in American agriculture. American farmers are only getting older, fewer, and poorer. And without our farmers, we cannot have vibrant rural communities, food, clothing, booze, and we lose our best stewards of the land. So let's fight for our farmers. We can do it. We are doing it. And we can take the next big step forward if we work together. And instead of just voting with our fork, we also vote with our vote. And so I'm very happy to have been here today and chatted with you. I look forward to a nice little discussion around some of our questions. And I'm going to bring up the chat myself right now.
Okay, thank you so much for your presentation, Eric. Lovely to see the changes in your own environment as well. Let's take a look at a few of the questions. But before, I took a look at the answers to the question that you asked our audience, namely, did they grow up on a farm or maybe are on a farm now? And it turns out a lot of people in our audience grew up on a farm. They're farmers' sons or farmers' daughters. I even saw someone who grew up in a farm in Barbados, or someone who grew up on a farm in the Netherlands, but now moved to Canada to start their own farm there. I'm curious to hear, why did you want to know that question, or the answers to that question?
Oh, I love knowing, who's in the audience, because those of us who have grew up on farms or actively farming have kind of a farmer's view on agriculture. And we have a shared way of looking at the issues in agriculture and a shared kind of experience with those issues that's different for folks who are not directly related to the land. So it's awesome to hear, especially transitioning farming in the Netherlands over to farming in Canada. I wonder how similar or different that kind of climate experience is.
Be a whole world of changes, I can imagine. Let's look at some of the questions that have come in. I have a question from Christian. What do you like about farming? What is so appealing to you?
I like farming because it's the number one thing is it's a career that allows me to live out my values in everything I do. Ultimately, what my farm looks like and how we operate is up to me. Do I believe in how important to me is it that I'm a good steward of our land? Very important. So we invest in cover crops. We invest in taking the land out of production. We invest in different ways of providing nutrients that are maybe less damaging than the easy way. So to me, it's an immediate reward of living out your values and the way that you operate. I always say that farmers' land is like a painter's canvas, and you can learn a lot about someone just by looking at their farm.
Yeah, I can imagine, indeed. We have a question coming in from Daniel. He wants to know, how can we get that younger generation interested in farming again? Yeah, you made a big point saying that there's so few of them. What can we do to encourage them to take that step?
I think there's a lot to be done. There's a million different barriers to becoming a farmer for someone who's new to it. But I think one of the spaces we can find a lot of hope for is that, like me, at least in America, 75% of those new farmers did not grow up on a farm. They did not grow up farming. They maybe didn't even grow up in a rural community. They're choosing to come to this profession out of a desire for more meaningful work, out of a desire to have work that aligns with their values, out of a lifestyle choice where they want to live something maybe more simple, more slow than modern city life. And I think that that's an incredibly hopeful note, because, you know, as many laws as we want to pass and as much support as we want to put out there, that's not going to make people want to farm. That's just going to make it easier for those who want to farm. So there's some good societal trends that are helping us move in this direction.
That makes absolute sense. I have another question, which is quite long, so I'll try and read it out a little slower. Eric, is the reduction of the number of farmers not just also the process of scaling up? In Holland, it's already happening for the last 40 years. Here, it's also difficult for young men and women, I'd add, to take over the ownership of the farm, but they are farming. Is the acreage also decreasing, or does this remain the same? And this is a question from Peter.
Thank you, Peter. So I will speak to my experience here in America, although it does sound similar to what you're describing. The farms we're not losing farms by acres. In fact, the average amount of acres in American production has been relatively stable. It more fluctuates based on kind of non-market reasons. The acreage has remained the same, but the number of people farming those acres continues to go down. Or another way of thinking about it is the number of acres per farm continues to increase. I think about it, and the number of people are going down, because people are the heart of the culture of agriculture. And without people, we just have agra, and agra does not a culture or a community make.
One final question. How big is the percentage of plant-minded training or education in the US compared to, for instance, IT or medicine? And IA, I have to say, is the only initials that I have. Who asked this question?
That's a great question. I do not have statistics for that, but I did go to a public university that has agricultural training and an agricultural degree. Generally speaking, the emphasis is on guiding young people into careers that are not agriculture. And that is justified primarily because agriculture has such poor returns and such a negative economic outlook that people feel more comfortable suggesting someone become a carpenter, a plumber, or a business person, for example.
So there's some ground to gain there as well, I can imagine.
Absolutely.
Nodding very clearly, yes. And with that, we have to wrap up. Thank you so much for joining us here today, and good luck today, because I know it's a hectic day in the US. We'll be following it here as well. Thank you so much.